Title: Inside Iowa's Prison Where Hope Slowly Dies. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. The story begins. The walls that never forget. The sun rises slowly over Fort Madison, Iowa. From the outside, the old penitentiary looks like a relic. Its stone walls carved in the 1830s still stand tall against the Mississippi River, weathered by nearly 2 centuries of confinement. Locals call it the castle. To some, it's a symbol of justice. To those inside, it's where hope goes to die. Built before the Civil War, the Iowa State Penitentiary is one of the oldest operating prisons in the United States. For decades, it was home to the state's most violent offenders, murderers, escapees, and lifers with no chance of parole. Yet beyond the headlines and criminal records lies something quieter, more haunting: the silence of men who have watched their lives fade behind stone. When you step through the first steel gate, everything changes. The air is colder, heavier, thick, with a kind of stillness that seeps into your bones. The clang of each door echoes through the hallway like a final heartbeat. Correctional officers, their faces blank from years of routine, move with mechanical precision. Everyone here knows the system. Every step, every breath, every minute is controlled. Inside these walls, time doesn't move forward, it circles endlessly. Men count days not in hopes of freedom, but in the number of meals or the cycles of shift changes. The cells are narrow, 6 feet wide, with walls stained from decades of use. The paint peels, the air smells faintly of bleach and iron, and from the corners, you can hear the faint scratching of a broom or the hum of distant voices, the only proof that life still exists. An officer once said, "The hardest part about working here isn't the danger. It's watching men lose themselves." He wasn't exaggerating. Iowa's prison system, like many others across America, has wrestled with overcrowding, underfunding, and despair. Over the years, reports have surfaced of mental health crises and suicides, especially among inmates serving long sentences. Psychologists describe it as institutional decay, a slow erosion of identity where men stop being individuals and become part of the structure itself. One inmate, interviewed anonymously for a 2024 investigation, described his first month. "At first, I thought I could handle it. I was wrong. And here, the silence screams at you. You start talking to the walls, to yourself, to ghosts. You forget what outside smells like." Many of these men came from broken systems long before they ever wore prison blues. Poverty, addiction, and trauma led them down roads that ended at Fort Madison's gates. But once inside, those conditions don't disappear. They just take on new shapes. Depression, anger, hopelessness. The cycle continues even behind locked doors. The Iowa Department of Corrections has made attempts at reform: new mental health units, educational programs, and counseling sessions. Yet, according to investigative reports, the resources remain stretched thin. Some prisoners wait weeks or months for mental health evaluations. Others, especially those in solitary confinement, spiral into psychosis. One guard described it bluntly: "Solitary breaks people. Some never come back." Inmates in isolation spend 23 hours a day alone in cells smaller than a walk-in closet. Lights never fully turn off. Meals slide through a narrow slot. Conversation is rare, and human touch is non-existent. Studies have shown that after months of this, the brain starts to change. Perception dulls, emotions fade, and reality begins to blur. Still, amid the darkness, fragments of humanity remain. A group of inmates tends to a small prison garden during summer, growing tomatoes and beans in plastic tubs. Others read old donated books or write letters they may never send. Some sketch the view of the Mississippi through the cracks in their barred windows. For a few moments, these men reclaim a piece of their stolen selves. Outside, tourists pass the old stone towers without a second glance. The town has grown around the prison like a shadow: restaurants, motels, and gas stations relying on its workers for business. Most locals don't think about what happens inside. For them, it's just part of Iowa's landscape. But for those who have stepped within its gates, the image never fades. Every corridor tells a story of anger, regret, punishment, and sometimes redemption. The walls have absorbed everything: the cries of first-time inmates, the prayers of the condemned, the footsteps of guards who spent decades patrolling the same halls. Time has chipped away at the limestone, but not the memories. The Iowa State Penitentiary isn't just a prison. It's a mirror, reflecting everything a society chooses to ignore about justice, punishment, and humanity. Here, men pay for their crimes with more than their time. They pay with their souls. And as the cell doors slam shut for the night, one truth lingers in the air. Inside Iowa's oldest prison, hope doesn't die suddenly. It fades one heartbeat at a time. Life inside the walls. Morning in the Iowa State Penitentiary begins the same way every day, not with an alarm clock but with the sound of steel. Doors clang open in rhythm, one by one, echoing through the narrow corridors like a cold mechanical heartbeat. Inside each cell, men rise from thin mattresses, stretch their aching limbs, and prepare for another day that looks exactly like the one before it. The daily schedule hasn't changed much in decades. Lights on at 6 a.m., breakfast at 6:30, a tray of lukewarm oatmeal, bread, and coffee that tastes like iron. Then roll call, inspections, and a shuffle toward assigned duties. Some go to laundry. Others work in the kitchen. A few sweep hallways that will be just as dirty tomorrow. But for many inmates, especially those in long-term confinement, work is a distant privilege. For those locked down in restrictive housing, the hours blur into one another. They spend 23 hours a day inside cells no larger than a parking space, their world reduced to 4 concrete walls, a steel sink, and the faint sound of distant voices. Some talk to themselves just to hear a human sound. Others scratch words into the wall, dates, prayers, names, reminders that they still exist. In the general population, things move differently but not softer. The noise of clanging trays, shouted orders, and heavy boots on concrete fills the air. Men learn to watch, not speak, to scan faces for danger before taking a single step. Respect here isn't earned through words, it's earned through silence, consistency, and endurance. One former inmate told a local reporter, "You learn quick that it's not about being tough. It's about staying alive, mentally more than physically." The psychological toll of Iowa's prison system runs deep. Decades of underfunding have left mental health services stretched thin. Many prisoners live with untreated PTSD, schizophrenia, or depression. Medication is often delayed, and therapy, when available, happens behind glass partitions that make human connection impossible. A 2024 report from the Iowa Department of Corrections noted that suicide and self-harm rates had risen steadily, with several cases linked to isolation and lack of social support. Inmates described the experience as living but not feeling alive. Even the environment conspires against hope. The prison's lighting is harsh, fluorescent, and cold, while the temperature swings between freezing and suffocating. In winter, wind from the Mississippi cuts through the cracks in the old limestone walls. In summer, the heat bakes the cells, making sleep nearly impossible. The noise never stops. Footsteps, doors, keys, and the endless buzz of the intercom, reminders that privacy is a concept that doesn't exist here. Yet within this grim reality, there are fragments of life that refuse to die. In the education wing, a few inmates gather for GED classes and writing workshops. Some discover poetry. Others learn carpentry or welding. One inmate wrote, "In here, a pencil is more powerful than a weapon. Because when you write, you escape, even if only for a page." Guards, too, carry invisible weight. Many have worked the same shifts for 15 or 20 years. They see the same faces, the same despair, the same stories replayed. Burnout is common. One officer described it quietly. You don't realize how much of it follows you home. The noise, the anger, the smell of concrete. You close your eyes and still see the bars. Every corner of the penitentiary holds echoes of humanity's extremes. Violence, guilt, forgiveness, faith. Chaplains visit the cell blocks weekly, offering prayers to men who haven't seen their families in years. Volunteers from nearby churches bring donated books and handwritten letters from strangers who remind them they're not forgotten. For some inmates, those small gestures mean more than food or sleep. Still, for every act of kindness, there's an undertone of sadness. The reality is that many inside will never leave. Iowa's oldest prison holds lifers, men who will die within its walls. When a prisoner passes away, a simple notice is posted in the hallway. Name, age, date of death. No funeral. No final goodbyes. Just another cell emptied, another number reassigned. Outside, the world keeps spinning. Seasons change, governors come and go, but inside Fort Madison, time stands still. A man can serve 20 years here and walk out feeling like he never left the moment he arrived. One former inmate summed it up in a letter after his release. The scariest part isn't being locked up. It's realizing the world forgot you were there. Behind those walls, Iowa's oldest prison doesn't just hold bodies. It holds stories, regret, and the fading light of men who once had dreams. Each sunrise begins with hope, and each sunset takes it away again. The breaking point. By the time the sun sets over the Mississippi River, Fort Madison is quiet again. From a distance, Iowa's oldest prison looks almost peaceful. the golden light reflecting off the limestone walls, the towers silhouetted like ancient watchmen against the sky. But inside, peace is a word that doesn't exist. The Iowa State Penitentiary has seen nearly 2 centuries of despair, riots, escapes, and reform. Each generation of guards and inmates leaves behind a different kind of scar. Some are physical, bullet holes in doors, blood-stained corridors long repainted. Others are invisible, trauma, guilt, the slow erosion of humanity that seeps into everyone who steps behind those gates. In 1981, a riot broke out that would change Iowa's prison system forever. Dozens of inmates, pushed past their limits by overcrowding, poor food, and harsh discipline, turned the cell blocks into a war zone. Fires raged, officers were taken hostage, and for 12 hours, chaos reigned inside the fortress. When order was finally restored, several men were injured, 1 inmate lay dead, and the state could no longer ignore the warning signs. That day, a retired guard recalled years later, we learned what happens when a system forgets that prisoners are still human. It was after incidents like that that Iowa began to rethink incarceration, at least on paper. New facilities were built, including a modern complex near the old site in 2015. The new prison promised safer conditions, better ventilation, and upgraded security. Politicians called it a new era. But many former inmates say the problems simply moved from one building to another. Behind the new walls, the same old struggles continued. Mental health care remained scarce. Staffing shortages led to burnout among officers. And the human cost, the quiet despair of men who had lost everything, never left. As one psychologist put it in a 2023 review, you can replace the walls, but you can't replace what's been lost inside them. For some, the system's failures are personal. Take the story of Michael, a former inmate who entered at 19 for armed robbery. He spent 17 years inside Fort Madison. By the time he was released, he had gray hair and trembling hands. "The world moved on without me," he said in an interview. "When I went in, we had pay phones. When I came out, people were talking to watches. You can't catch up to life after losing that much time." Michael now works with a local reentry program, trying to prevent others from going down the same road. He often visits schools across Iowa, showing photos of the old prison and speaking softly to students about choices. "You think prison will make you tougher," he tells them. "It doesn't. It makes you empty." Stories like his reveal the haunting truth. The Iowa State Penitentiary isn't just a place where men serve time. It's a place where time serves itself, endlessly repeating the same mistakes. Even officers and staff aren't immune to its weight. Many have struggled with post-traumatic stress after years of exposure to violence and confinement. Several have taken their own lives. A veteran officer described it as fighting a war that no one sees. In 2024, a new state report showed that while Iowa's incarceration rates had declined slightly, the conditions for those still inside remained dire. The prison's mental health units were full. Suicide watch beds were limited. And incidents of inmate-on-inmate violence had risen sharply since the pandemic. Despite this, there are glimmers of change. In recent years, local universities and nonprofits have partnered with the Department of Corrections to bring art, education, and counseling into the prisons. Programs like the Inside Out Initiative and the Last Mile have helped inmates learn coding, writing, and life skills. Some have even earned degrees behind bars. A warden remarked, "We can't undo the past, but we can give them something to hold on to, a reason to believe they're still worth saving." For a few men, that belief becomes their anchor. One inmate, serving life for second-degree murder, spends his days painting murals on the prison chapel walls. He says each brushstroke is a prayer, not for forgiveness but for peace. Another inmate grows tomatoes in the small garden behind the workshops, calling them his children. Small acts of life in a place built to contain death. Outside those walls, families wait for phone calls that never come. Mothers grow old waiting for sons. Children visit through glass partitions, pressing their palms against cold surfaces. For them, the punishment doesn't end at sentencing. It continues in every missed birthday, every empty chair at dinner, every unspoken apology. For all its efforts to modernize, the soul of Iowa's prison remains haunted by its history. The original limestone towers still stand near the river, and used but not forgotten. Locals say that on quiet nights, when the wind blows across the water, you can hear the echo of doors slamming, ghosts of the past still locked inside. At sunset, the floodlights flicker on, illuminating the razor wire and the endless rows of cells. A guard walks his last round for the day, keys jangling softly in the quiet. Inside, a man sits on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, whispering a prayer that no one will hear. He doesn't ask for freedom. He asks for forgiveness. He asks for a chance to remember who he was before the system erased him. Because inside Iowa's oldest prison, hope doesn't die in an instant. It fades slowly until the silence becomes the only thing left. And when the final light goes out, the prison sleeps, but the pain inside its walls never truly rests.